This is the World Organic News for the week ending 10th of July 2017. Jon Moore reporting. We begin this week with a post from Iowa Environmental Focus entitled Climate Change Disproportionately Affect the Poor. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that the lower down the socioeconomic scale one resides, the worse off one is in this material life. And to continue this trend, climate change looks likely to hit the poorest the hardest. Quote, researchers figured the economic costs of climate-related impacts like rising sea levels, more extreme weather and higher temperatures. They ran many simulations, which calculated the potential costs and benefits of each phenomena for a variety of industries and business sectors. They figured that on average, the US will lose roughly 0.7% of its gross domestic product per 1 degree of Fahrenheit increase in global temperatures. This economic burden, however, is not to be shared equally by all parts of the country. The poorest counties in the US, which are mostly in the South and Southern Midwest, are likely to suffer the most intense economic downturn. Some counties expected to lose more than 20% of their gross county product. End quote. And the article goes on to suggest that not only will these areas suffer, wealth such as it is in poorer counties will redistribute to wealthier areas in the Northwest and New England. And these figures are just for the US. I would guess low-lying areas of Bangladesh will not be making increases in GDP when they flood. These changes have been predicted and mapped for decades, so it's surprising such things still need to be explained. Any major changes, economic, climatic and most social, do not bode well for the bottom half of society and haven't for much of history. This is why this post-Second World War economic situation coming out of the Great Depression was set up to ensure a greater level of equality across the classes, at least in the dominant parts of each culture. The irony is, in the US and here in Australia, the poorest have been sold a pup. They have been told global warming is a political scam by the left, and as the figures show from the post quoted, it is these very people who will suffer the most who have been sold the greatest lie. On a more up note, a post constructing an alley cropping food forest from Permie Flix provides a carbon neutral or even carbon positive solution for agriculture, and it is the agricultural sector outside the developed nations which is among the poorest in the world. Alley cropping is a system of perennial planting in an alley pattern which anchors soil, provides a permanent return while still allowing for the possibility of cash crops. I first came across this in a permaculture manual and an organisation called SALT, Sloping Agricultural Land Technology. The link in the show notes points you to a food and agricultural organisation program in the Philippines. The philosophy behind alley cropping, as applied in the Philippines example, is to anchor the soil. This is critical, and I think I've made the point before, everything starts with the soil. It is possible to choose perennials which can be cut and dropped to improve soil structure, nitrogen availability, animal feed and food. The video post mentioned above works along these lines to build a permaculture food forest. The system is extremely flexible. I've seen it applied using saltbush in Western Australia to provide drought forage for sheep while wheat is grown in the alleys. The wheat stubble, or the whole plant in a drought year, become available feed for the sheep. Sheep droppings fuel the soil, which in turn feed the cereal crops. Everything feeds everything else in the system, and the greatest outcome is growing depth of soil activity and water holding ability of the soil. By integrating the alley species into the whole system, they act as a framework onto which a sustainable food production system can grow. Depending upon the climate, the water is usually pushed sideways, allowing it to penetrate to the subsoil, and so on, year after year, until irrigation becomes a thing of the past. I'd recommend you watch the video in the post as it goes into the site-specific challenges they are meeting. After all, not everyone listening to this show will need to protect food from bears, but wild herbivores are endemic in most locations. Deer, skippies, that sort of thing. The principles discussed are, therefore, applicable just about anywhere. And finally this week, another post from Permie Flix entitled Atmospheric Water Harvesting Peru. Given the changes in rainfall distribution across the globe as climatic changes influence weather patterns, this video post shows one solution to water harvesting. In this case, the community had never had access to potable water close to their location. An 11-hour round trip to the bottom of the valley to collect water was a problem screaming out for a solution. That solution in this case was extremely low tech. Shade cloth structures which trap the moisture in the air and funnel it to storage containers. The video is only 2 minutes long, and I would highly recommend you give it a watch. The technology is site-specific and would be of little use in the desert regions of the world, yet where it works, it is brilliant. And on that happy note, we will end this week's episode. If you've liked what you've heard, please tell everyone you know any way you can. I'd also really appreciate a review on iTunes or the podcatcher of your choice. Thanks in advance. Any suggestions, feedback or criticisms of the podcast or blog are most welcome. Email me at podcast@worldorganicnews.com. Link is in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back in a week.